Hello. So I'm here, and that can mean one of, well, among the many things it could mean, two of them are that this is a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday at more or less 10, or it could mean that I am not oriented to time and date, and it's not a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday at more or less 10. So the clock on the computer says 10:03, so it's more or less 10. And I think it's a Wednesday because I'm pretty sure yesterday was a Tuesday. Well, welcome anyway. This is supposedly relaxing painting with Dyson Dungeons. And as you know, there isn't very much painting that usually goes on here. Today, there will be no painting going on. I don't expect. Um, there probably will be some painting on Friday, some minimal painting on Friday. But today there will be no painting, but it will be Dyson Dungeons because regardless of what goes on, it is always Dyson Dungeons because that's what we are. I am part of Dyson Dungeons, which runs the Dungeons and Dragons show, which streams on Twitch on Sundays at 2. And you can catch it on YouTube and as a podcast, and you need to watch it because it's an amazing show. But this is one of those sad little spin-offs of the show that started when I was painting dungeon tiles and minifigs for the show, which I haven't done very much of for quite a while because we have all we need for the show. Someday there might be more, I don't know. But in the meantime, I'm building models because that's what people do when they're like between 8 and 15 and when they get to be over 65. And I'm the latter. Obviously, I'm not between 8 and 16. So I'm quite a bit over 65 and I'm building models because that's what I planned to do when I retired and I didn't until this stream started. So there. Well, what I'm building next, having done a whole bunch of models, and one of the things I'm planning to do, since I like to just sort of wander around and talk about things in a stream of consciousness kind of James Joycey kind of way, is one of the things I want to do. I almost lost my train of thought there, which happens when you do, stream of consciousness, James Joyce sort of talking, is that I want to make a list of the models that I've done so far because there've been shockingly quite a few of them, um, and sometimes I almost forget what they are. So at some point, maybe I'll get out like a pencil and a piece of paper and write down the models that I've done so that I can remember, and maybe you can go back and look at them on YouTube because this goes up on YouTube as well. Well, the thing I'm building next is I decided to do something fairly simple. I've done fairly simple things a couple of times, and they turned out okay. This one is a submarine. It's a famous submarine because it was captured on the high seas. I don't know why they were high, okay, but they were. It was captured actually during combat, kind of. And the important part about it is when it was captured, we got an intact Enigma machine. In fact, two of them, and along with the code books, which was the Germans' top highly secret encryption and decryption system, the Enigma. The Germans didn't name it Enigma. We named it Enigma. I think the British actually named it Enigma, but that's that's I guess not really relevant to this. But we captured this 2 days before D-Day, not anywhere near D-Day. This was captured off the coast of Africa, not the coast of France. And it became famous because it was the first ship captured by the U.S. Navy in the open ocean during a war since 1815. And it then ended up indoors inside of a big enclosure in the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, which is where I bought this model because I visited this submarine several times there at the Museum of Science and Industry. the new display is pretty amazing. They just built this huge enclosure out of concrete and steel. So you, and the submarine is suspended in kind of a pit. If you've ever seen Das Boot, and they go into this big concrete shelter, it's almost like that, like one of the shelters that they used on the coast, I think, of Norway, probably for stationing their submarines. And you can walk all the way around it and see all the detail of the submarine because it's just there, right in front of you. And you can even take a tour inside of it. And I've done that a couple of times too. It is, I would say, it would be really unpleasant being serving on a submarine. It'd be extremely unpleasant if there were depth charges going off around you. But yeah, this is it. This is a model of the U-505, which was the designation of it. That's on the side there, um, of the submarine that's in the Museum of Science and Industry now in Chicago. And when you go there, if you go there to visit and see the display, they have movies of its capture. They took movies, film movies of its capture, and they have all sorts of artifacts that they found inside, and it tells the story about how we violated the Geneva Convention by not letting the families of the crew, because I think all but one survived. We didn't let them know that they were alive, which was a violation, and we kept them secretly imprisoned as POWs secretly for almost a year until the war ended. And that was a secret because we didn't want the Germans to know that we had gotten an Enigma machine, because we wanted them to keep using it because we could break the code, and we wanted them to keep using the code that we had broken and not change it. Okay, so I unboxed this. It was an unboxing. And you go back and watch on Monday, and you'll see an unboxing. And these are the parts. And what I'm going to be doing today is taking them off the sprue and cleaning up the attachment points and cementing together parts that will then create seams. And seams will be formed when the hull is put together and the decks are put on. And here the conning tower halves. Seams will be formed when those halves come together, and those seams need to be filled and sanded so that they don't show when the model is built and painted. And I can't fill them and sand them until after the cement is cured, so I'm going to be doing the cementing today, unless I talk for an entire 3 hours and don't get anything done, which is something I could try to do. But yeah, I'm going to be doing, and I'll probably build the stand too. Why not? Okay, I'm going to do A, B, C, and G. Okay, that's what I'm not going to say I'm going to do that. I'm going to say that um, I'm, I'm planning, I'm thinking about, I anticipate I will try to do A, B, C, and D today. G, A, B, C, and G, skipping over these for the time being. Okay, that's because these need to be cemented, and the cement needs to set so that I can fill in sand. And I want to do the cementing first so that on Friday I can fill in sand. And if there's time left, which is unlikely because of the pace at which I work, which is to say very slow, um, if there's time left, I'm going to skip over to 2A, final assembly, which is not at all what will be happening. Okay, there will not be final assembly today. And I'll be getting out the guns, the mounts and the guns. Okay, and the reason I want to do that is because they're going to be painted black. Everything else is painted one shade of gray or the other, except for the propellers, which are going to be painted bronze. Okay, these are painted black, um, and if I assemble them, if I get them out and assemble them, then um, I can paint them and set them aside inside of a little container like this, okay, where they will wait for assembly after everything else is assembled and painted, and that will be kind of like final assembly. But here, A, B, C, and G. I'm going to get A parts out first. And as you can see, it's attached to sprue, which is the non-functional part of the injection molding. And those need to be cut off. And then where they were attached, there'll be like protuberances kind of that need to be filed off and sanded off. And as I'm looking at this, it's like, okay, this part is pretty well molded, but right around here, it's just sticking out. There's plastic sticking out, and that'll have to be sanded like that on the other side too. No, this one's pretty clean. Well, that's all part of the sanding and filing, cleaning up parts. So these are that. This is B. This is C. These are not on the sprue at all. I think they might have been at some point because there's a spot here where it looks like it's broken off. I'm going to put these all on kind of simultaneously because when the hull, two halves of the hull are put together, these get set on the top of it, and they might not fit very well. Okay, the whole thing needs to fit together, and then these are the G parts. These are the conning tower. Those just come off and they get cemented together. And somewhere in here, oh yeah, here they are. This is A. These are the parts of the stand. Those look pretty straightforward. That's supposed to be painted black too. But I'm going to start with B by cutting these off, sprues, and then fitting the parts together. Maybe sanding down these rough edges here where it used to be attached to something. And it broke off, so there's like a little indentation. That's too bad. And then there's a bunch of these little parts, and these little parts are all badly molded because they have flashing excess plastic sticking out all around their edges, especially this one. Geez, you can just see it all around the edges of like the gun barrels and the supports for the propeller housing. But that's how it goes. So this box is now, I don't need this box. It's now in the way, so I need to put it somewhere. There, over there. That's a somewhere. Um, okay, I'm just gonna, I turned the cardboard around so I had a nice clean surface, but I'm gonna cut these on the cardboard, which means I'm gonna scar up the cardboard. So I'm just gonna use this side here that's already got cut marks and paint and junk all over it. And instead of using like a razor blade, to cut them off and risk like it did on the deck here, risk getting a little indentation and nick on the side where it broke off. I'm going to cut them off, which leaves a fair amount of plastic sitting on there, but that can be sanded away if there is a nick, then it needs to be filled in, and filling in, even with good plastic putty, doesn't leave as nice a surface as sanded down plastic. So I'm gonna every once in a while I'm gonna look up to see if I'm on camera, because frequently I'm not, because my director and camera people are not competent. Yeah, this is fun. You can watch me saw through plastic. There, now it's off. And there's a little bit of excess plastic right there that probably will be sanded off after these are cemented together. I have to see whether or not that interferes with the fit of the part. And I like to leave a little bit of plastic there, because, like I said, filing it and sanding it leaves a better surface than having a gap that gets filled in. This is, I keep repeating, and I will repeat with a great deal of frequency. At the risk of repeating myself, with the intent of repeating myself, I will repeat that this is not a how-to show. I am not a master modeler. I am not a master painter. Frequently, I do not know what I'm doing, and I just make it up on the fly. But I can give you certain tips, like if you're cutting things off the sprue, investing in a little saw like this is kind of a good idea, because then you can cut the parts off like that, leaving a little excess plastic that you can then file and sand off, instead of breaking it off, potentially breaking it into the part, okay, breaking it off and getting a chunk of the model broken off at the same time. And I know that's possible, because when I built models as a kid, I would just break them off, and then, the fuselage and wing would have little divots in it. So investing in a little saw like this to take them off the sprue, and other uses, it's just a nice little saw. You can, for sawing little things with a really fine saw blade. Um, it's not as cheap as a single edge razor blade, if you can even find a single edge razor blade. That was the universal tool when I built models as a kid. It's a single edge razor blade was a razor, a sharp razor blade on one side, and it had like a folded over blunt end on the other side, so you could hold it and not cut your fingers off, and use it to cut and scrape things. Use use single edge razor blade a lot, because I didn't have a little saw like this. Even if I knew they existed, I didn't have any money, so I wasn't going to be able to buy one. But now I do, because there, it's one of my very few professional modeling tools. Brushes and a little saw. And now this is just trash. Will go in the trash, adding microplastics to the environment. Okay, well, let's see if these are in the way. Test fitting these parts is, well, this is really long. This is going to be interesting, getting this lined up, because I'm not very good at getting parts together. This will be kind of fun. Yeah, those are going to be in the way a little bit. Sand off some. Well, see, this comes together. You can see that you end up with a seam here. Why doesn't the front of this go together at all? Okay. Well, if the parts get lined up, yeah, see, the thing is, see me how I'm fumbling around with this? The thing to look forward to, the potential disaster to look forward to, is that the edge is going to be coated with cement that's dissolving the plastic as I'm fumbling around trying to get these parts lined up. Okay, as I'm trying to do that, the plastic is just going to be dissolving and oozing, and then the front doesn't come together when everything else does. There, kind of like that. I think I'm going to try this. I want this to be kind of, held together. These little alligator clips. These are worth getting. These are really cheap. You buy like 50 of them at a time. Yeah, that'll work. If I put it on carefully, it won't gouge the plastic very much. But this, I'm going to put these on it right now. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to see how these fit back. See, after those are put together, then this is somehow supposed to go in here. You can't imagine doing this, but there's all sorts of model cement underneath there. Just, dissolving away, making a huge mess of things. It doesn't, it just does, it isn't going to fit. Yeah, the clips just fell off. Hmm. Yeah, I'm glad I'm playing around with this because it's not working. There's a ridge here, which I'm thinking is supposed to be an alignment ridge. The part, this bit is supposed to sit on top of it. Yeah, I'm baffled by this. Okay, now I get it. That's not how it goes. The deck goes on top. So whatever that ridge is about, it's not about lining up the parts. See, this is why it was good that I was test fitting this, because if I had put the cement on without having test fit, I would have put the cement in exactly the wrong place, and I would have been failing, as you saw me flailing around, failing in my effort to get the parts actually to go together. I'll try this again. Clips on. Probably go flying off again like they did before. But at least now I have a better idea of what is supposed to be happening and how. And you will see that. You will see that better idea about how it's supposed to go together and how in just a few moments once I get these parts actually lined up. Which they're not there. Okay. So the thing I learned is that these actually go on top. Go on top like this. Like that. And it doesn't really fit very well. This is supposed to get like lined up back here. When it does, that part, there's a little gap there. And it comes together. And this side goes like that. And I have to say it fits much better. It fits much better when it's put on the right way. Why isn't that laying? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's supposed to go like that. And this is supposed to be closed like that. Yeah, this is why I want to put the deck on before the whole cement sets, because otherwise it might not fit. Okay, so that's how it's supposed to go. Okay, you can begin to imagine cement just getting on fingers and hands and just making a huge mess at this point, right? You might as well start imagining that, because that's kind of what's happening. What I'm not quite understanding is why this part, I'm going to put the cement on there and then set this down on top of it. Without it falling in. Practicing how to hold it. But it doesn't. There's going to be a gap in the deck there under the conning tower. I'm going to have to figure out what to do with that. See, that lays down and it sits on there pretty well, but this side ends up having a gap. It's like there's something in the way right here. Mm. I think there's, no, that's interesting. Okay, this has happened before, but you're going to see it again. Is that, I'll show it to you in just a bit, and you will go, really, this really happens? And the answer is yes, it really does. Okay. So what I'm trying to deal with here, I don't know if you can see this, is that when this, when it falls in, okay, I need to keep practicing this. So this side, why does that keep happening? Squeeze it together there. That'll work. Squeeze it together. This side sets pretty cleanly. You can see that there's no gap there. This side, okay. This side has a little bit of a gap right here for this part. Okay, there's a little bit of plastic right there. That's why I'm messing around with this. There's a little bit of excess plastic. I can hardly see it. It's right here. I can feel it. It's just a flaw from the molding. I need to remember to file that off. But the thing I want to show you, because this has happened many times before, and I think you can actually see it still on camera, is this side versus that side. This side is thicker than that side. Okay. It just is. And the same is true back here. You can see that this side, the plastic is thinner than it is there. And this has happened several times with models. It happened with the service module of the Apollo stack, for example, where two halves come together. Of course, it'd be two halves because they're halves. That means two. The where the two parts come together, and one is thicker than the other. And it is. One is thicker than the other, and then they don't match up that well. And in this case, especially along the top here, this part is molded thinner than this part. Kind of odd, but there it is. Okay, I'm going to get a little needle file. This is another thing I'd recommend you buy if you're going to do modeling, is get a set of needle files. Just little files. There's round rectangular ones and round ones, and the one I'm missing, and I don't know where it went, and I'm really kind of sad about it because I liked it a lot, is it's flat on one side and half round on the other. And that half round would be very handy at certain times. Thing is, right here, I'm using a file and not sandpaper here. I need to get it, you know, square. A little bit of plastic right there. Oh, okay. I'm looking through the railing here. You probably can't see it. And the files are too thick. But there's a flaw in the plastic here. It's this little extra plastic that is right here on the edge of the railing. Maybe one of these has a point. That would get in there. Little bits of plastic that are sticking up. I'm going to use 1500 grit. Rid of that little bit. It's not supposed to be there. What's going on here? Looks like I smashed my finger. I did. So this is why it takes me so long to make models, is that I'm trying to get the little bits of excess plastic and stuff out of the way so that the parts fit better. I'm going to just pile this down on the inside a little bit. Just this 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 will get sanded off when I sand the seams. But if there's plastic intruding, if there's plastic intruding on the place where they're cemented together, it will keep the parts from coming together. And I would just as soon the parts not be um, kept from coming together. There's a lot here. I'm going to take some of this off. Oh, yeah, I stopped talking. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. And I said, sorry for not talking, and then stopped talking again. Because there's no music. We lost our music on this stream quite a while ago. And the decision was made not to put it back because of spurious copyright claims, which become a really annoying thing. And it's easier to just have silence, I guess, on the stream other than the sound of a file filing. And then there was this one was clean, the other one wasn't. good thing about this is that the seams along the keel here, that's the bottom of the boat here, um, are smooth plastic. So when I sand those off, I'm not getting rid of any detail like on an airplane model, like a plane model, where the model would be showing the rivets, and when the seam is sanded and the detail of the rivets is sometimes lost right along the seam, kind of in it, unless one is really good at what you're doing, which is not what me am. That's not what I am. I'm not that good at this. People who are really good at this wouldn't lose the rivets along the seam. They would know how to manipulate their file and sandpaper and stuff so they didn't sand off the little rivets, but I'm just not that good at it. It's not. So I've lost rivet detail when filling and sanding in the seam, making the decision that it's, it's better to have lost some rivet detail on the model than to have a gap, because like real airplanes don't have gaps running a line of a gap running down the line of their fuselage. They just don't. No matter how convenient that would be for a model maker if they did, because then you wouldn't have to worry about filling in the seam where the two halves come together. If in fact the real airplane had a seam there, a visible gap, but they don't. And so, yeah, but this doesn't have that issue because there aren't any rivets along the keel. It's just a smooth. So I can sand that without losing any detail. I will have an issue of the texture of the finish, and I'll talk about that sometime in the distant future when I'm actually doing the sanding. Okay, when I'm actually doing the sanding, test all of that again later. This is where there's plastic there that is interfering with the deck fitting. Yep, test fit again. See if I fixed the issue. Yeah. Sometimes these, fractions of a millimeter, little excess plastic, just make a difference in how the whole thing comes together. This here, this is just a Just unfortunate. There's plastic that just oozed up all around the edges of this opening here. Have I used up my time yet? How am I doing? I've used up almost an hour. That's not bad. So far, as you can see, I've accomplished nothing. No visible progress. Oh, that's a lot of. That's really. That's not good. Even with 1500, it changes the surface texture of the plastic. So even under primer and paint, it will show. So what I'm going to end up doing is using this really fine paper, and I'm going to actually like rub down the entire surface of the submarine before I paint it, so that it has the consistent texture. This is being recalcitrant. Seriously, seriously a problem. I want to be careful with it, but it's just going to take. Unfortunately, it's going to take a while. There's a lot of excess plastic protruding here, and I want to get it off, but I don't want to use a file on it because that would gouge the plastic pretty badly. This way, I use this, even though it's taking a long time. It will at least not mess up the texture of the surface. But when this came out of the mold, what looks like happened is that some bits of plastic stuck to it. They stuck to the model. They didn't come cleanly off the mold, and so there's just protrusions of plastic. I'm getting most of it off here. Then there's some up there too. I'll need to turn the piece over, sand that. This eventually. Becomes There's a color difference when the white goes away. And I need to get this here. Rub it, keep rubbing at it until it's done. You're saying, when will you finally get around to sticking the cement on? And the answer to that is way too soon. It's a little bit of a white ring around that. I'm not feeling the excess. I think what's happening is it's just this is catching the edge of the indentation there. It's leaving some residue. You know, there's definitely residue in there. Let's see if I can get a little piece of paper towel here. Clean that out. Not sure what goes in that hole. I don't think anything does. I think it's just a hole. Okay, well, it should work. Rough spots on. This is the place where the deck sits. If there's a rough spot, it'll keep it from sitting flat and even. And there were some little flaws on the edges of these. Do a lot of checking with fingers and fingernails. They're really good at catching irregularities. Good at telling you that something is not smooth. Little, I think that's an indentation there. A little notch or something there that it broke off of the sprue in the box. Okay, well that's not. It'll be okay. And then I'm going to test fit all of this one more time and practice assembly, practicing the assembly, so that when I have cement on it, I won't get it won't be a total disaster as I get cement all over my fingers and on the hull. And then there's a little bit broke off there too. There's a little indentation. Some excess here. Because once there's cement on there, that stuff just spreads everywhere. It can just make a hideous mess. And there's a pretty good chance that that will happen because the parts are long and they don't fit together all that extremely well. As you saw, this kept falling in. Okay, well, get these out of the way. If I leave them out, I'm almost certain to scrape the side of the hull against it and put a big gouge in. Why would that happen? It just would. It just would because that's what happens to me when I'm building models. Stuff like that happens. See, I would put my finger there, cement would ooze out. I will have cement on my finger. That's the kind of thing that will happen. What I want to do is something like that. Maybe get a clothespin. These also work as clamps. So say I would start on the end there, clamp it there. Move along. Clamp. Move along. Clamp. Move along. Clamp. Get to the front. Notice that the front doesn't close like it hasn't ever. Clamp. Then yeah, take this without knocking the clamps off. And I want to slide this on this way, holding it here on the end where there's no cement. It actually kind of bends. Look at that. It bends. Get that down. I'm not sure what's clicking there. The model instructions don't say, oh, by the way, it's going to click. That needs to be held in place somehow. Okay, so that will be on. That will be here. Wonder if I should use contact cement for this. 'Cause it will grip. Or else I just need to hold it for like 3 minutes. But it does it bends down, and so it doesn't want to stay. Okay, so once that's on, I'm gonna assume that it's on, and I've been holding it for like many minutes. This curves up. Is that this one? This will be in place, and then I'll hold this like this, and well, I can hold the cement is going to be there, so I can hold it like this. Set it like that. So this, yeah, that's just better since I got rid of the excess plastic here. And then this will just need to be held in place forever as well. Maybe I'll put the front one on first. I might put the front one on first. Wonder if I could put a rubber band around that. I don't know. Contact cement would hold it in place. I might do contact cement. Um, it might actually work a little better because it would grab. Wonder if I could thinking I could cement this and let it set. Okay, I could let this set with these clamps on it. And I think if I do that, there's enough flexibility that if I put the deck on later, yeah. So I am going to actually do that. I'm going to The deck protrudes over the sides pretty uniformly once it's put together. I'm going to do the hull and just let it set. Probably even sand down the seams because this just goes over the top of it like this. And I can put this on a little bit later. Okay, I'm going to do that. So these parts will go on later after this is cemented together. Yeah, you always have the possibility of scratches from those things. Maybe if I start at the front, work toward the back. Yeah, I'm going to start at the front and work toward the back. And these are going to go on later then. Well, at some point it just has to be done. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to put the cement on and then put it together. And hopefully not destroy it. I don't want to destroy it before I even get started. That wouldn't be good, would it? No, it would not be good. I can say that with 100% surety that destroying it this early in the process would not be good. Usually I just squeeze a little bit onto the cardboard, but then it's just a mess on the cardboard. So I'm going to think ahead a little bit here. Put this together, and while this is sitting here, curing between now and Friday, I'm going to begin working on the conning tower, I think. Okay. This needs to go all along here. I'm applying it from the inside. You see that it slips every now and then. When it slips, it slips onto the inside. This, I realize that could be a disaster. The thing I'm going to want to avoid as much as I can, and I don't know how that's going to go, is as I'm assembling this, keeping the cement off of my fingers. While at the same time holding these parts together. Okay, this is clamped. What is this? They're not lined up. They're lined up here, but not here. One edge, one side is higher than the other. I don't know how that could happen. Because up here, here it's okay. Right along here, one side is much higher. It's like right along here. I can sand that out. I'm going to just leave that on there. I put the other one on too, I think, to help space it. It's not cemented on, but I think it'll help in the curing process here. Or not. This is pretty good here. Here. These don't line up. It's lined up. It's okay in the front. It's not really okay. It's like there's a little bit of a warp or something in the part. But there's a gap. It's even here, pretty even. But this side is higher than this side. And I think it might actually be because they are different thicknesses. Well, that's going to have to be done through sanding. The parts, I mean, that's where they go. The parts are lined up. They're just not even. But the deck goes on okay. And that's the important part. You know, the bottom isn't going to be that visible, but the deck needs to be deck needs to go on. And the deck goes on actually, and there's still a little bit of a gap there. Yeah, a little bit of plastic needs to come off in the future, but I'm going to leave this upside down. That's going to sit there and cure, and then there's going to be a lot of sanding done, and I'm going to sand the entire hull, like I said, with the really fine 1500 grit paper, maybe even the polishing stuff, so that it has the same texture. Put this back in the box. Since I'm going to have the saw out, I'm going to cut off pieces for the base as well. Well, that is going together a little differently than I was planning, but I think it's going to come together okay. But after, it's going to require a fair amount of sanding in order to get it right, because the parts don't align perfectly. Fortunately, they don't align perfectly in a way that will be invisible once it's all sanded off. It's just going to require quite a lot of remedial sanding. These are parts for the stand. There has to be a stand, otherwise the submarine will just flop around. Apparently, I can't saw through sprue and talk at the same time. Not a surprise. So now I've got the parts for the conning tower, and I can't hold on to things, and also for the stand. Do the conning tower first here. That's going to all be sanded off when the parts are put together. Any obvious flaws? I don't see any real obvious flaws. So I'm not taking it all the way down to the surface of the model. Just getting rid of the major parts so that it doesn't interfere with the parts fitting together. That's the point, the intent. I'm getting clumsy. I'm just dropping stuff and knocking things around. Don't do anything delicate today. It'll go badly. these seams, these don't line up either, these parts out here. So I'll get painted gray later. So yeah, where the seams are going to show where they don't line up perfectly, like in the front here and along here, that all just gets sanded away. And then these blobs up here are from the sprue attachment that comes off. So I'm going to go ahead and cement this together too. Why not? Oh yeah, I should see it. If I can clamp it. Is it possible to clamp these? That works. I don't know if I want to do that back here. Maybe up here like that. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, two clothespins. Make sure it's flowing. Yep. Get this out of the way so I don't put a finger or a part in it. Cement on the contact surfaces. What I've learned is that it's actually okay if the cement oozes out a little bit. The technical term oozes, because that's what fills in the gap. It's pretty amazing how these parts really don't line up. Too bad. There's a pretty significant seam there that needs to be, yeah. That's why I've got files and sandpaper to deal with pretty significant seams like that. And now do the stand. Stand will be done, and I'm going to be painting this. What I'll probably end up doing with this is priming it gray and then spray painting it black. I've got some decent black spray paint left over from other models. So there's look, um, there's submarine parts. Huh. That's the thing about this particular model, unlike the other ones that I've been building, is that most of the other ones there were parts that needed to be painted before assembly. Otherwise, you couldn't paint them, couldn't get to them, couldn't reach them after it was put together. But this model, except for the propellers and the guns, will be fully assembled before it's painted. And then I'm going to prime the whole thing gray. And I do believe the gray primer is going to look like a pretty decent color, finish color for the hull. I'm thinking the bottom of the hull, and then I've got a light gray that I'm going to test. Which, if it works, that would be good because then I don't have to buy more paint for the upper half of it. So the next several streams, what you'll be seeing me do is I'll be taking pieces off of the sprue and spending a good deal of time filing and sanding them because they're messy, and then sticking them on the submarine until they're all stuck on in a nice. I'm going to paint the whole thing. It has a decal on it, a faceplate on here on both sides. Oh, oh, damn. Okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna take the time to get rid of those. This is my opportunity to rail on about circles that are molded into the parts. And the stand has circles, and it just I'm gonna take 20 minutes and get rid of them. They're just they just they're just messy. They're just not nice. Okay, so what I'm talking about, maybe I should do it the other way. So there's this little plaque kind of thing that's supposed to be on the outside, okay? And there's a decal that says Wolfpack Leader. I have the decal here somewhere. Yeah. So there's a U505 decal and then the little logo things. And it says German Wolfpack Leader. U505 wasn't. I don't know why it says that. That's just puffery. Okay. And in theory, it's supposed to go on this raised edge here. So it looks like a plaque. But if you look, what you'll see is on either side of it, there is that's part of it right here. Can you see it? Yeah, there's a circle. There it is. Get the light just right. And when these things come off the mold, okay, for some reason in the mold, there are these circles, and you can just barely see it on the other side. I think those are contact points of some sort. And, it's not like a rivet hole or anything meaningful. It's just a circle that's right there. And they're just ugly. So one thing I could do is I could turn these around. Okay. You want to stand like that. Notice how you don't even need to cement them. They just stick in. I could do it so that the outside shows there's no circle on the outside. The circle is on the inside. Um, or I could sand the circles off. I need to actually sand them off anyway. There's excess plastic showing, but I think I'm actually going to have this. Well, I'm going to sand the circles off. Just make them go away. And I'm going to do a light sanding on all of these surfaces just to get just to drop something on the floor. I haven't dropped anything yet. There, finally, I got that done. I got the dropping in. This and just my sanding block. lightly sand all of the surfaces so that they have the same, slightly less than perfectly glossy finish. And at the same time, get rid of what this is all about. There's a scar there, excess plastic that shouldn't be there. Well, yeah, there's just a lot of, I mean, it's just a stand, but really they couldn't get it right. There's just little blobs of plastic here and there. Inside ridge is a mess. There's a seam line that goes all the way around the top of this. Doesn't really need to be there. Now I'm gonna. This is a one way to end up using like a half hour of time. It's just getting rid of all the molding flaws, all the flaws. Stand. Yeah, seam down the center. You know, it looks like it's intentional, and it is, but that it's also no. That I mean, they didn't line up. Okay, the two halves of the mold. If I run my finger this way, there's a ridge. So one half, the mold, the two parts of the molds just didn't line up. I'll just put it that way. And this sandpaper isn't going to get rid of that. I need some coarser stuff. I'm going to use the 320 and get it to where it needs to be, and then polish it after that. When you say it's just a stand, why are you bothering? And the answer is it just looks bad. They just didn't line up. I'm just going to sand it so that it has a uniform color. Now it's kind of a rounded edge. That's okay. And then I'll use the finer grain sandpaper to take care of that later. There's just always something, and this is not. I'm just I'm taking more care with this model than I probably need to, but you know, it fills the time. I have to do something during this stream, right? Oh yeah, okay. Pretty much, pretty much that entire seam goes around the entire thing. Now that I'm looking at it, it's just ugly everywhere. I think I might just leave it this. I'm not even going to polish it. I'm just going to leave it since everything is getting sanded. I'm just going to leave it this. Just clean it up and then paint it like this. Because there's a line all the way around the top of the mouth of the where this two parts of the mold come together. They don't line up anywhere. I'll just sand it all off. I was noticing it when I was sanding the little sprue bit down on the bottom. Is like, oh yeah. When you really look at it, it's really messy. The whole thing is just messy. Oh, there's a circle there too. Get rid of, yeah, I'm mad about get rid of these circles. Circles on both sides. No, just one side. The circle. I'll put the circle on the inside. I don't really need to get rid of these circles, but I dislike them so much. I mean, I really dislike them so much that I'm going to take the time to make it disappear because I think, and they're just everywhere on these models. I should, I should look up sometime. Why are there little circles on all the injection molded model parts? Why do they put them where they show? If you're doing it like a fuselage, right? And the two halves are going to be cemented together. Put the circles on the inside, and nobody will ever see them because they're going to be on the inside of the model. Now those circles are gone. I feel much better having made them go away. It's not like I feel great, but I prefer to not have the circles. And everything looks gray and dusty because it's got sanding dust all over it. But I'll wash that off before I paint it. Little irregularities on the little protuberance here. And this is what started it all, where the parts don't line up there. Two halves. What am I doing on time? It's almost noon. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll probably finish sanding this, before, well, eventually I'll finish this. And then I'll cement the parts of the, I don't think I need to cement them the way when I test fit them, the friction will just hold it together. I'll put the parts together. And since I don't have to cement them. I can actually prime them. I'm going to prime the stand between now and well, not only that, I'll get it painted. I'll prime it and paint it, and the stand will be done. I'll, I'll be doing painting, but not on screen because I'm spray painting. But I'll have a stand, so there won't be any submarine, but there'll be a stand for it. It seems appropriate, doesn't it? Well, on Friday, um, the work on the submarine will continue, but what I'll be doing is unclamping, declamping, unclamping the hull and sanding all the seams and hopefully not having to fill them. There might be little bits here and there where it needs to be filled. But in any case, I'll be sanding it down and using the really, really fine polishing paper to rub down the entire hull so that it is of uniform texture. And then I will cement the decks to the top and then continue to take parts off of the sprue and prep them, prepare them for attachment. And probably, since it's all going to get painted the same color eventually, is I might even, depending on how the deck goes on Monday, I'll be able to, if the parts are prepared, I'll be able to get really close to getting them attached, assembled. Yeah, this looks pretty messy, but it just needs to be washed. Now I'm going to spend most of the rest of this stream just sanding these parts, and then giving them a wash, and then sticking them together and preparing them to be primed and painted. Yeah, so the two halves of the mold came together, and they weren't that visible, but when I started sanding them, they became quite visible. There's seam lines where the two molds came together, and little bits of plastic oozed out between the two molds. Those it always just looks ugly, especially on rounded bits like these on the where they show along the top. It looks better when the seams don't show. It looks even better if the two halves of the mold matched each other. Two halves of the parts actually lined up. That would look even better, but it's not what I've got here. It's much improved. Believe it or not, it is much improved. So now I need to do the same thing to the other one. I'm going to start on this one by getting rid of the circles. Detested circles. Make them go away. You can really see them now that I've been sanding it. See that? Circles. To be circle elimination. These are pretty deep. Not giving up easily. They're really deep down. Yeah, they really wanted the model. They really wanted to be annoying here. Well, eventually, enough plastic comes off to make them disappear. So when I unboxed this on on Monday, I was saying that there's you can, if you go to the Museum of Science and Industry, you need to reserve tickets ahead of time because the tours sell out fast. They take maybe 15 people through at a time because there really isn't much room inside these submarines. And so the tour isn't very long. It's maybe 15, 20 minutes. They want to run a lot of people through to at least, walk through the submarine so you don't spend a lot of time in it. But it's worth doing. If you're ever in Chicago and you go to the Museum of Science and Industry, go on their website probably and buy timed tickets for the tour because then you get to go on the inside of the submarine and they haven't changed anything. It's still like it was when it was captured in 1944. I think they got the grease out of the galley, but the mattresses are still the same and all the fixtures and everything. I think the batteries might they probably discharge the batteries so that you don't have sulfuric acid fumes and stuff all over the place. That would be bad. So they've done some things for safety. They still have some torpedoes in there, but the warheads have been removed and with batteries and things so that there's no fire hazard and noxious gas hazard, that kind of stuff. But it's very, 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 very much as it was when it was first captured. Um, and it's it's just interesting to imagine. I think there's like 50 or 60 people working on this submarine. What it would be like being that close together, 200 and some feet underwater, you know, trying not to think about all the water that's above you. It's one thing if you're in a boat, right? And you think, whoa, I don't want to think about all the water that's under me because it could be like a mile or more, really deep, and it can get kind of scary even when you're on like a cruise ship or any kind of a boat. But if you're in a submarine, you're not only thinking about the 5,000 feet of water that's under you, but then you start thinking about the 250 feet of water that's above you, submerged like that. It's pretty sobering. But then you take the tour of the submarine and it's just tiny. Everything is so small. Um, there aren't enough bunks for everybody. So I think there's two to maybe even three. There might be like three shifts of serving on the submarine. That there might be three. I'm not sure. There might be two. There's at least two to every bunk. Okay, there might even be three for some of them. And so when you're off duty, you get slide into these bunks. There's three deep. There's about 18 inches from the top of your bunk to the bottom of the next one. So you have to slide in. So the submarine is claustrophobic as it is, but when you get into your bunk, you can't sit up or even kind of roll over or anything. You just have to slide in and lay on your back and not move. It just it doesn't. I don't think it would. I'm a little claustrophobic. I can say for sure that that would be a problem. Um, there's a tiny little shower. Everybody, you just don't bother after a while. Right? The main officers, the captain, the commander. I think maybe four officers have their own bunk that they don't have to share with anybody. It's one of the privileges of being an officer. And a tiny little room. The captain has a desk, real posh kind of thing. Um, the galley, where they're serving meals all day long because of different people are, serving on different shifts at different times. So not everybody eats all together. There aren't really any tables. You just grab something and you'll find a spot to lean up against a bulkhead somewhere to eat. Galley is you, you hear the term galley kitchen, which means a small kitchen. This is beyond small. It's microscopic. It's maybe 5 feet by 4 feet, something like that. There's room for a couple of heating pads to boil water, cook surface. And somehow they're able to prepare meals and have dishes for the entire crew. It's pretty amazing that it can even be done. Some of the crew, they're privileged. They get to sleep in the torpedo room with explosive warheads underneath them and above them. And if they need the torpedoes, they have to fold up the bunks. There's no sleeping when you're shooting torpedoes. This other one's going a little faster now that I kind of know what I'm doing. Being less careful, I'm not sure. And I'm glad I'm using the coarser sandpaper because otherwise this would be taking much longer. So having made the decision that kind of matte finish surface, I'm just going to paint this matte black anyway. To get rid of the molding seams just requires a lot of sanding, and so just it'll just be sand it all, and leave the texture as it turns out. But yes, I would strongly encourage you that if you're ever in Chicago, that you get times tickets ahead of time. Otherwise, you won't be able to get in. The tickets will be sold out, and then you'll be able to see the submarine from the outside and see the movie and watch the story and look at the artifacts and things that they found. But in order to get in the submarine, you need to buy timed tour tickets, and they'll take you in, and you'll get to experience the inside of the submarine, which is, like I said, pretty pretty small, pretty tight quarters. Oh yeah, and then they'll talk about this, and it's really, you think about this. So you're on this submarine, right? And you think about it: run silent, run deep, right? That kind of thing. When you're underwater, you're running on batteries. Okay, but when you're on the surface, you're running with a diesel engine, and this is a gigantic diesel engine, and it's inside the middle of the submarine. Okay, and yeah, you're right there with it. You're standing right on top of the engine practically if you're in the engine room, and you can imagine that it's not silent. If you can, like a eight-cylinder gigantic diesel engine thrumming away on the inside of a sealed vessel, you probably can't. I mean, it's probably not really possible to imagine how loud it would be. I think they might still do this on one of the tours. I vaguely remember that they probably didn't do it at full volume, but they played a recording of what it would have possibly sounded like, and it's just, even even if they only played it for like maybe 10 seconds, it was really loud. Definitely. But they wanted to give you a little bit of an experience of what it would have been like being in the engine room of the submarine when the engines were running, which was actually most of the time. The submarine spent most of their time on the surface because they had limited battery life and limited oxygen. like the nuclear submarines now that can stay under. They just go underwater and they just stay there for months at a time because the reactor provides regeneration of the oxygen, replenishes the air, freshens the water, does all of that sort of stuff. Um, that didn't happen on these submarines. I don't know how long they could stay underwater. Maybe I think maybe a day if they weren't running very. You have to save the battery and the oxygen, but if it wasn't an emergency situation, they might have been able to stay under that long. I'm not really sure. They'll tell you on the tour. They'll tell you how long you could stay underwater running on batteries. So not only is there a seam between where the two halves of the mold came together, but they didn't line up, and so the ridge is even more significant than it was, and it would have been if there was just a little leakage between the two parts of the mold. So the other, there's really interesting things there too. They've got, some of the torpedoes that were used, and they did a cutaway so you could see the interior of the torpedo. The warhead isn't there anymore. I mean, the place where it was is there, but the explosives are gone because they don't want a big explosion there in the museum while you got all sorts of people wandering around and looking at stuff. But that's pretty interesting too because they show you how the torpedo works. I mean, they show you the works on the inside of the torpedo. They don't actually shoot a torpedo to show you how it works, but they describe it. That's pretty interesting. And they have a bunch of artifacts related to the capture of the submarine and the internment of the crew, the exemption, the special exemption they were granted to not have to follow the Geneva Convention about letting the families know that the crew was still alive. They they don't try to hide that. That's a good thing. Like they say, why did it end up in Chicago? It's kind of a good question. One of the reasons why is that the captain was from Chicago, and the submarine was kept by the Navy until the 1950s, and they used it for reverse engineering and for training and things of that sort. Like I said at the very beginning, the submarine was not really the important thing. That there was a submarine captured, that was just fine because people wanted to study the submarine, see if there was anything in it that was worth copying. So that was done. But the important thing was the Enigma machines that were in the submarine. Those are the most important things. But so the submarine was kept, and usually what they would do with these things is they would use them for like target practice or just sink it somewhere. Not even bother taking it apart or getting rid of the environmentally harmful things in the submarine or anything. But the captain was from Chicago, and he said, "Well, let's put the submarine in a museum." And Chicago is on Lake Michigan, so they could tow it there on the water. But once it got to the city, the museum is it's near the lake, but they had to get it out of the water and onto transport to get it into the museum. And it was an expensive proposition, but they did it. And so it was parked outside for a long time, which makes sense if you think about it because it was big, right? But then it was rapidly deteriorating. It actually lost like maybe a half inch or so of its hull. It just rusted away because they weren't spending a lot of time and energy painting it and scraping it off and things of that sort. So it was pretty badly deteriorating, and they built this amazing this hangar, submarine hangar, to display it, and it really is very impressive. You go in there and you go, oh, here's a submarine, and it's just sitting there right in front of you. Totally, totally walk around it, see the top and the bottom. A stunning display. Even if you can't get in because you didn't get your timed admission tickets for the tour, it's worth checking it out. The museum itself is pretty cool too. You'd like the Museum of Science and Industry, um, but I'm talking about the submarine because I'm building the model of the submarine that's housed there. They have a time. They actually have a, they show the construction. There's a little movie, a time lapse movie, where they show how they move the submarine from outside to the inside of the building. Pretty amazing that they could do that, but they did. They cut it up on trucks and they lifted it up, set it back down on its stand in this display. That itself is a fascinating thing to watch because it was quite a feat, an engineering feat. Circles, circles gone. That's the sort of logo. Yeah, I'm gonna sand that away. I don't need to have some sort of logo on the model, so that will be gone. I'm destroying the copyright here. Hmm. Yeah, I might actually finish getting the sanding done and then put this together. Or maybe I'll just leave it, whatever that is. It's staying. this is this is dead. Okay, now I'm get rid of these circles. I think I'll just stick it together and then wash it off. Wash all the dust off once it's together. Otherwise I'll have to wander off going and get some water and clean it that way. I'll wipe it off, with a paper towel, but before it's painted, before I prime it and paint it tomorrow, I'm going to wash it. Getting rid of the evil altogether. Evil molding circles. I've spent a lot of time. If you look back at some of the YouTubes of my model building, I've spent a lot of time sanding away these. The best ones are the ones where the circles are raised up above the surface, because then those can just be sanded down to the surface. These, like actually most of them, are indented, and so the entire surface needs to be sanded down to the level of the bottom of the circle, which just takes a lot longer and ends up thinning the plastic. Usually there's plenty of plastic. It's usually plenty thick, but it's just something I need to do. And eventually they disappear. I'm just sanding this side, even though it's smooth, just to keep the surface texture consistent, which is to say no longer shiny smooth plastic, but sanded down, somewhat rough surface. Okay, there. That's a mess. It is officially a mess. Wipe off, wipe off some of the dust. The whole thing will just be washed before it's painted. Some of it out of the way anyway. And then this is getting close to the point where I start talking about what I've done so far today and what needs to be done and what will be done, theoretically at least, in the near future. The near future being Friday, assuming that everything, you know, if there isn't anything that gets in the way of streaming on Friday. Hopefully not. You never know. Things happen. But I'm planning on Friday to come back, and it's getting really close to the time when I start talking about what I am going to plan to do on Friday and recap what I've done today, because I always like to point out that in fact I have done something, even though it doesn't seem like much. least I've gotten rid of these ridges on the outside where it didn't line up. Gotten rid of most of the lines along the top here. Got rid of the circles. What's going on here? There's a little nick or something on there. Hmm. It's gone. And the stand goes like this. These bits go on here. When I tested them, they fit together. They were really tight. In fact, they don't even doesn't even want to go together. They're so tight. Tight enough. They're not going to need cement. That's for sure. And on the other side, and then this will have been assembled. Like I said, it does not need cement. It's not coming apart. It's holding pretty well. And then, as I said, that I pulled it apart. That's pretty odd. That's pretty on brand, as they say. That oh, this doesn't need anything, and then it just doesn't stick. Very last one, everything else sticks. Everything else sticks just fine, but that last one is doesn't want to stick. But it sticks well enough, sticking well enough that I'm not going to cement it. As long as I don't pull it apart while it's not being, you know. So the submarine is supposed to sit on here. That sits on here somehow. I guess it just sits on it. We're not going to cement it on. That would be kind of that could make a mess. But there. So I'm gonna wash this just under some water. Just wash it off, and then paint it black. I'm gonna prime it gray, I think, first, and then spray paint the black paint on it. And then on Friday, this will be painted black. There, that's what it'll be. These are trash. This is still good. Still, still some usable on there. Um, well, I'm gonna move the camera there. That's the hull, the bottom of the hull of the submarine. It's got clamps on it because the cement is setting, and that's the conning tower. And then on Friday, The seams are showing. Okay, so I'm going to get some sandpaper. I'm going to use the 1500 grit sandpaper and sand all of the seams, and hopefully they won't need any filler. And then I'm going to rub down the entire hull of the submarine with that same 1500, and then after that, this to sort of polish it. It'll be not quite the raw plastic. It'll have a slight texture to it, not as much as this, because this is a 320 grit sandpaper. It's going to be with 1500 grit sandpaper. And then it'll be turned over, and I'll attach the decks. Okay, I'll cement those on and hold them in place, because the decks actually, they bend. The surface of the top of the submarine is not flat; it's curved. On the back, it goes down; on the front, it goes up. And the pieces of the deck are flexible. And in theory at least, they will adhere to it after I hold them in place for a long time. Um, have I got a half hour yet? Oh, really? Okay, so what I'm going to do next then, and maybe I'll start on this now. I'll cut the pieces out anyway. Is there's all these little bits that go on here. The propeller shaft, the dive planes, the rudders, all these little bits here, cutters, capstan, all these things get onto the deck of the submarine after the conning tower is inserted and things. And the guns, there's machine guns and anti-aircraft guns, because if it's caught on the surface, they want to shoot at the airplanes. And then there's a cannon that was actually kind of a main weapon on some of these submarines. They wouldn't shoot a torpedo; they would shoot at a merchant ship with a cannon. These guns are all painted black. Okay, they all come with a mount. I'm going to cut these off, and maybe I'll take a look at how much prep work they're going to need. But um, on Friday, I'll put these in after I finish sanding down the seams of the hull. Okay, and buffing the entire hull. After I'm done with that, and I get the decks put on, the deck assembled. Okay, after that's done, um, I'll start working on the guns, because I can paint those black. I know, get those painted, set them aside somewhere. And then there's not a whole lot of parts. There aren't a whole lot of parts to this. I'll be pulling those off and getting rid of the flashing and getting ready to attach them to the submarine. And so this might come together. This might come together fairly quickly, unless there's a disaster. Well, I say until there's a disaster. There will be a disaster. When there's a disaster, then things will slow down as I attempt to fix it. So I'm gonna. The guns are next, because they're painted a different color, and they're not going to go on to the ship until later. There's one there. There's a couple here. There's one there. And then there's supposed to be stands for the guns. I'll have to find those. They're supposed to be numbered. The parts are supposed to be numbered. Let's see if they actually are. Colors. 25, 25, 26, and 19. I don't know why they're identical. I don't know why there would be different numbers. 25, 27, 26, 28. What if they don't? Can't see that small. I need head magnifiers on just to read the numbers. It's not them. Those are numbers 22 and 23. 20, 21, 22, and 23. I don't even know what those are. Let's find out. No, those are the capstans. Oh, those are these little bits here. Some of these parts are actually quite small. See? I'm not finding the gun mounts. 19, okay. That's the cannon mount. That's actually pretty big. Cannon mount is almost bigger than the cannon. Okay, well, 25 and 26 look identical. 27 and 28 look identical. I don't think I need to worry too much about getting them mixed up. Sometimes the parts are not identical. They're asymmetric. One's left, one's right. But these seem to be symmetric, so they're going to go in here after they come off of the screw. Okay, this whole thing is in the way. I know I don't like to just break parts off, but this is just trash. And it's in the way of being able to clean off, take off the gun. So there, no, that's not in the way any longer. Sometimes when it gets near the end, it pops off and goes flying like that. Okay, this is just going to go in here. That's the small part. I don't want to lose this spot. I understand why they put that on there. That's just very much going to be in the way. Yeah, just like before, I apparently am unable to saw and talk at the same time. I don't know why that is, but it seems to be the thing. This, I'm just going to snap that off because there's an indentation there anyway. I really don't like doing this. I am anyway. I'll fix that in post, as they say. And then there's this gun, this anti-aircraft gun. And then these are just machine guns, also anti-aircraft. They really don't. They really don't want these to come off nicely, do they? There I go again. I cannot saw and talk at the same time. Um, so while I'm doing this, what I'm going to do is talk about Dyson Dungeons. Yeah, I should put it on camera, huh? The Dyson Dungeons is a group of family and friends who run an amazing Dungeons and Dragons show that streams with live chat on Sundays at 2 on Twitch. And you can catch previous episodes, which is a good way of catching up on the storyline and getting to know the characters. Oh, these are really a mess. These are really fine um, machine guns, and there's flashing all around them. And of course, they're attached to the sprue here. These little machine guns, I'm going to have to be extremely careful so that I don't break the barrels. And you can count on it. I'm going to, at some point trying to get these things prepped. I want to break at least one of them and then have to try to repair the machine gun barrels, those tiny little machine gun barrels, because I'm going to break one for no reason other than to, prove what a klutz I am. I just cut one of them free. I can't remember which one. That one. Um, so yeah, on on Friday when you come back, I'll probably be to the point where I'll be prepping these, and then there could be a disaster with the hull of the submarine or the attachment of the decks. There could be a disaster there, but these machine guns offer a significant opportunity for disaster in the form of breaking the barrels. So come in on Friday, and you might have a non-zero chance of witnessing a problem because they are just that kind of part. They have every appearance of being the kind of part that will be a real problem. small, they're delicate. There's way too much excess plastic on them. Just, they're just waiting. They're just begging for something to go wrong. So, watch our Dungeons and Dragons show. It is absolutely amazing. I'd recommend actually going on YouTube so that you can see some of the old episodes and catch up on the storyline and get to know the characters better. I think that would be a good way to catch up with the show, and you can watch it, when you want, because YouTube is there. You can watch it at 3 in the morning your time, not at 2 in the afternoon on a Sunday when we're actually streaming. So that, yeah, the freedom of the internet, so so to speak. Okay, there's a bunch of more little parts on there that I'm not going to mess with now. I'm going to cover this up so that I don't lose it. Put the saw away. Clean up the trash. So this away. Oh, that's knock things over. I knew there was going to be something. At least I didn't break it, but I did knock things over. Keep this over here. I will remember. Well, that's what I'm going to do in order to remember what I'm doing. I'll be off camera for just a moment. I'm going to get some cardboard. This is my test patch of different black surfaces. Yeah. So this is the spray paint I used on the interior of the GT350, and then I have this matte finish that I used on the bottom, and you can really see that it does. It gets. I wanted the interior because it's made out of leatherette, vinyl seats and door panels and stuff. I wanted that to be, slightly glossy, and the spray paint is slightly glossy. But then I wanted the bottom of the car to be matte, and so I got the Model Master Flat and Krylon matte and sprayed them there, and it made a difference. But this is going to go on here, and I usually put little bits of tape underneath it because the spray will move it around. So I don't need to really need the cardboard to do the spray because I can just spray it on the surface upstairs. But I do use this because this way I can carry it upstairs to be spray painted and then carry it back down without touching it. Okay, so I'm taping that. I'm going to take it off the tape and wash it. Okay, I can do that. See, and then after it's washed, because there's a lot of sanding dust on it, I'm going to take the time to prime it with gray because the black paint might not adhere to the plastic that well. I'm going to prime it and then paint it. I need to get all those little nooks and crannies and stuff, so I'll be wasting a lot of paint painting this. But on Friday, this will be painted black, and then I'll put it in a box. I need a done box. I haven't gotten one out yet because I haven't done anything yet. My regular done boxes aren't going to work with the submarine because, I mean, for some parts of it, like the guns and conning tower and stuff, but like this, the hull, it's the hull with the decks put on. I don't have a done box. I don't think that's big enough for that. Let me see. Let's see if I've got. Can it fit in here? Just fits. It doesn't have a cover on it, but I could put it in here and put a paper towel over it. I can use that for the hull. And then I just need a little box. All the little parts, like the guns, finished. Crawling around the floor with the box. Yeah, this will do. It says Lotus Ford on it because I kept the finished Lotus Ford actually is small enough to fit in here. But it also says done because it was a done box. That meant the parts were done before it was a Lotus Ford. I don't want anybody to get confused. There, now it's not a Lotus Ford anymore, but I will emphasize the done there. So what that means is like when I sand all the seams down here on the conning tower. Seriously though, the parts didn't line up. Now this part is they didn't line up. Now it'll all be done by sanding it off. It's just always something. I thought I had them lined up, but I didn't. The alignment pins didn't line up. So the misalignment has to be sanded away. That's disappointing. I should have caught that. I should have caught that when I was putting the parts together, but I just didn't. So I have to fix it in post. And so it's just going to take like 3 times longer cleaning it up than it should if I had been a little bit more careful. Well, thanks for watching. I'll be back on Friday. I'm planning to be back on Friday at more or less 10 o'clock. And what I'll be doing then is sanding seams and realigning parts that were misaligned when they were cemented together. And it'll work out okay. I mean, it will look okay once it's cleaned up and once it's fixed. By just filing and sanding, I've done that before. I have fixed parts like that before that have been misaligned. I need to see what goes on there. yeah, parts sit on top of that. That really helps. That makes that covers up some of the problems. So here and here, there are parts that sit on top of that, and I get to test fit those parts. And if they sit on top, then that covers up a significant um, it covers up a significant amount of the misalignment. And then I just need to worry about the very front and the very back and the edges. So um, I'm going to fix the front and the back of the conning tower, but then I'm going to get the bridge and the winter garden. I'm going to get those two bits out and test fit those just to see what really needs to be realigned, and what will in fact actually just sort of be covered up so that it's not really seen. But yeah, they're misaligned by a third of a millimeter. I mean, that's enough to be noticeable. There's always something. Usually the parts just don't fit the alignment. That's why when I read a book about how to build models good, it's not what it was called. That wasn't grammatical. How to build models. It said your parts aren't going to line up with the pins. The pins that go in the hole, the alignment pins, are not going to align. It just said it's not going to happen. And so they recommend sanding them off and aligning the parts by eye. Like if I had done that, the alignment pins lined up, okay, but the parts didn't. So if I'd actually done that here, they would have been in better alignment than they are. So that's just a tip from a pro book that I didn't follow. That's a tip I didn't follow. That's a tip from There was a pro book that gave a tip about the alignment of parts that I didn't follow because I used the alignment pins. Okay. The same thing happened with the hull. And it's generally true that the alignment pins don't line up the parts very well, and you're better off sanding them off and letting them slide around on each other and hoping that you get them, lined up right so that they're even with each other without getting cement all over your fingers by touching the seam where the cement is oozing out. On that note, thanks for watching. I'll be back on Friday. And on Friday, I'll be continuing to work on the U-505 submarine. See you then.